looks really familiar for anyone who watched my most recent book haul from Independent Bookstore Day, but I had my camera set up, so I thought I'd introduce a new vlog. As I mentioned in my other video, I am finished with my spring semester for school. That means I have 2 terms left until I am a full librarian, and I can't be more excited. I'm also really excited for the 2 weeks off. And what that means is I get to read whatever I want. I had an idea for a project and I couldn't really bring it to fruition until now. But as some of you may be aware, there are so many options for book reading or book recommendation options. There are paid sites. You can, get one of the blind date with a books from your local bookshop, library, Barnes & Noble. And libraries also offer this service. In Libraryland, we call this Reader's Advisory. And a lot of libraries or systems will have an online form that you can fill out, and a librarian will suggest titles to you based on books that you've enjoyed or not enjoyed in the past. So there's a couple larger systems that I was intrigued. A couple of libraries maybe a little bit further removed from my immediate surroundings. So I filled out this online form for the Denver Public Library book recommendation service and got my results back. They gave me so many recommendations, I can't even tell you, because they gave you options for adult reading material, for reading material targeted towards teens and towards children. And you could pick different genres within those age groups, and they would give you recommendations for all of them. Another service that I used that will probably come in maybe a different video, they said, oh, well, we'll recommend you 5 titles. I was like, all right, that's more than enough. Dodie at the Denver Public Library went absolutely above and beyond. I got 19 recommendations from this one online form that I filled out. So I'm not going to focus on 19 books. That's too many to try to do in 2 weeks. Even in the adult category, I got 8 titles recommended to me, a few of which I've read before, so I removed those from the list, but I'll let you know what was recommended to me. And a couple of them that I hadn't heard of, so picked them up from the library. I have audiobooks for most of them, so we'll see how many I can get through in the next little while. So the first book that was recommended to me by Dodie at Denver Public Library was The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. I'm going to read from their email since it summarizes the book for me. 10 years prior to the start of this story, 4 young Blackfeet went hunting on tribal lands normally reserved only for the elders and ended up killing a female elk, oddly pregnant during the wrong time of year. Now, as adults with families and responsibilities, the men still carry the heavy guilt of that day, as well they should. The spirit of the elk has been waiting to make each one of them pay the ultimate price. This classic tale of revenge horror oscillates among eerie moments, violent action, and an overarching sense of dread. With close narrations from 3 of the 4 men, one of their teen daughters, and the elk herself, there is an intensity, a breathless desperation that lurks just under the story's surface, giving the sense that everything that is about to happen, no matter how terrible, is inevitable and cannot be stopped. It is also a heartbreakingly beautiful story about hope and survival, grappling with themes of cultural identity, family, and traditions. And all of that is absolutely true. I read The Only Good Indians maybe 2 years ago in 2020 in the fall, and was blown away by the depth of feeling in this horror story. Nothing that happens in this book happened for no reason. There wasn't gratuitous violence, although there is pretty graphic violence. And it gave you a window into a culture and a perspective that most of us don't carry in the United States, especially maybe northeastern United States. And it was really a joy to read. And I've gone back and read a few other things by Stephen Graham Jones and look forward to continuing to read his works as they are published. Since I've already read that, I was also recommended to put Richard Matheson's Hell House and Full Throttle from Stephen King's son Joe Hill on your to-read list as well. So there was only one copy of Hell House by Richard Matheson at the library. I did pick this up and have not yet started it. I also have this on audio, so I'm not quite sure which way I want to go with this one. Sometimes I prefer to read horror because in my ears I can just sort of let it wash by and maybe not pay as much attention. We'll see how that goes. Full Throttle by Joe Hill is a collection of short stories, and I was really interested in the audio version of this because it features different narrators for every story, and Joe Hill gets some absolutely amazing audio narrators, including Kate Mulgrew, Zachary Quinto, Neil Gaiman narrates a story in this, so this was definitely a draw to listen rather than read with my eyeballs. I have access to both of those things, however this week decides to go. Next up was some nonfiction or memoir recommendations, in which Dodie just finished Nowhere Girl, a memory of a fugitive childhood. And if you like tense and emotional, this has it all. This memoir reads like a thriller wrapped around a coming-of-age story. Diamond grew up in a family always on the run from both real and imagined threats. As a child, these midnight moves could be fun and exciting, but never being able to put down roots and use the same name twice eventually becomes exhausting. Diamond recounts the tension this way of living put on everyone in the family, most of it induced by her charming, evasive, and sometimes violent father. She is abused by her brother, neglected by her mother, and constantly tested by her father. Diamond digs deep into her own reserves and emerges as an independent yet scarred woman. This was a memoir that I was unaware of. We had it on the shelves at the library. Nowhere Girl, a memoir of a fugitive childhood by Cheryl Diamond. I did start listening to this the other day. I tend to really like memoir on audio. It sounds like somebody's, telling me their life story. And yeah, it really starts off with a bang. We're sort of in the middle of the night moving from a hotel room and driving down this sort of deserted road, and all of a sudden there's another car behind the family's car and shots are fired, and the next chapter there's a mysterious illness, and whether or not to take this person to the hospital for fluids may be the reason someone lives or dies. So I think this is going to be really harrowing, figuring out maybe how she gets out of this lifestyle. She's at the point where I am in the story. I'm only in part 1. She's 5 or 6 years old, and obviously not going to make her own way in the world. It'll be interesting to hear what other adventures she experiences along the way. The other recommendations for nonfiction or memoir, I've read both of them. I read Educated by Tara Westover, which is maybe sort of similar to Nowhere Girl in that the family is very isolated from everyone else. The father is incredibly controlling and abusive and really leads to cycles of horrible manipulation. In Educated, Tara Westover gets out of her situation and graduates from Harvard, having never been in a classroom setting before her first class in college. So really amazing story there. The other is Robert Kolker's Hidden Valley Road, which is an examination of a family that had, I think, 11 children, 9 boys, and then 2 girls as the youngest. They live in a fairly isolated region, more based on the time that this family was developing rather than like isolating themselves. 7 out of the 9 boys, I think, had schizophrenia. And this was really integral to determining solutions toward making schizophrenia more manageable. This family was researched quite a bit towards the nature of schizophrenia and how it can affect the brain, people's behaviors, and really sort of a heartbreaking story of how this family had to maneuver around certain individuals that, for lack of a better term, neuroses or requirements to live on a daily basis. So definitely an eye-opening and interesting read for those who are comfortable enough to do so. So to lighten it up a little bit, I got a couple of romantic comedy suggestions. The first is On Turpentine Lane, written by Eleanor Lipman. Dodie tells me that Eleanor Lipman is a former journalist who creates wonderful characters. This one features Faith Frankel, who's feeling like a bit of a loser. She has a futureless job writing letters to alumni in the development department of her old private school. Her fiance, who gave her a piece of red thread in lieu of an engagement ring, is on a cross-country walk to benefit his own personal growth and is documenting the trip on Facebook with selfies that include smiling ex-girlfriends in locations across the country. No. Her insurance agent father has become a painter in his retirement and left her mother for the woman who convinced him to start a bat mitzvah gift forgery business. What? When Faith finds in the attic of her new little house a photo album containing images of what may be dead twin babies, she's so creeped out that she offers her empty second bedroom to her handsome, kind, newly single, and homeless office mate. Now, Nick Franconi is another idea whose time has come. All of that sounds incredibly strange, and now I can't wait to get into this. I think I also have this on audio, and this looks hysterical. Okay, and now I have to admit that I made a mistake when I placed my items on hold because titles are hard and some of them are the same. The recommendation I received is a new title and has a slightly different twist. The title I was recommended was The Layover by Lacey Horton. Well, Dodie, I would really love to read this book for this vlog, but I misunderstood the assignment, and I picked up The Layover by Lacey Walden. I got a little bit confused. I think somebody had a typo somewhere, but the last book that was recommended to me was The Layover, and I believe this is the correct author, by Lacey Walden. After 10 years as a flight attendant, Ava Green is poised to hang up her wings and finally put down roots. She's got one trip left before she bids her old life farewell, and she plans to enjoy every second of it. But then she discovers that former pilot Jack Stone is on her flight. And he has the nerve to flirt with her, as if he doesn't remember the role he played in the most humiliating night of her life. Good thing she never has to see him again after they land. But when their plane encounters mechanical problems, what should have been a quick stop at the Belize airport suddenly becomes a weekend layover. Getting stuck on a 3-hour flight with her nemesis was bad enough. Being stranded with him at a luxury resort in paradise? Even with the sultry breeze and white sand to distract her, it will take all the rum punch in the country to drown out his larger-than-life presence. And I'm not sure if I'll be able to read it with that tone in mind the entire time, because that sounds exhausting. It just got like sort of Valley Girl vibes of, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's here. But we'll try it out and see how it goes. I think as far as rom-coms, I'm probably more excited for On Turpentine Lane. But we'll see how this week goes. If you've read any of these, please comment now and let me know your thoughts. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next clip with some updates. I'll check you later. All right. So how about this for a really squinty update? It is Tuesday after work. I'm about to head into yoga class, but I wanted to let you know that I finished Nowhere Girl by Cheryl Diamond. Cheryl Diamond has written a couple of memoirs now. The first one was her experiences as a model, I guess. But the craziest part about her life is her family and the way that she grew up. They were on the run until she was 23 and finally figured out, like, I got to get out of this. And by the time this realization came through, her options were really limited, and she was incredibly blessed to have been able to get herself out of the situation that she could have been in. She was living in the United States at the age of 23, was a working professional, and it turned out she could have been deported. She did not have a homeland, and nowhere that she could legally reside. She didn't have a passport. She, I guess, found a fraudulent birth certificate, or maybe she found her actual birth certificate. I don't recall specifically, but with help from her grandparents and I guess a lawyer that she knew in New York, was able to, restart her life on sort of her own terms. And
it really was quite astounding. So it was a fascinating story. I very much enjoyed the audiobook. The writing itself was very episodic. I'll say, it wasn't necessarily like a straight narrative. So I guess you're looking for more, they're very much like snapshots of these things that happened during specific points in her life and how they may have, impacted to tell a much larger story. But sometimes it did feel a little bit disjointed based on her, maybe a jump in age or obviously a change in location, which occurred quite frequently in her childhood. But it's definitely a story that I would recommend if somebody's interested. I also started reading The Layover by Lacey Walden, I think is the last name. First chapter really didn't tell you much, gave you, a snapshot of the main female character and her leaving the apartment of her fiance before heading for her last flight. And I have to figure out what I'm going to start on audio next. I'm thinking about Full Throttle by Joe Hill, because I'm really looking forward to that audiobook experience. And I think if I get a little bit more time to read at work, during my desk time, my office time, it might be a nice way to listen to a story here and then move on to something else and listen to another story at another time. Hopefully I'll keep you updated. For now, I'm gonna head into the gym.
Well, hi. Yesterday wound up being pretty much a whirlwind day, from going to the gym first thing in the morning, headed to work, and then I had an early rehearsal after work. So it is now Wednesday morning. I am in need of a fresh cup of coffee, but I wanted to let you know where I was in my reading for this week. So as you know, I finished Nowhere Girl, the memoir of a fugitive childhood, I think is what that's called, by Cheryl Diamond, and I started on audio Full Throttle by Joe Hill. This is a collection of short stories, and I really was interested in the audiobook because each of the stories is narrated by a different person. So we had a really nice introduction, sort of an essay format of an introduction by Joe Hill, titled Who's Your Daddy? Because if you don't know, Joe Hill's father is the infamous Stephen King. So Joe Hill's development as an author, as a horror storyteller, especially, because that is how he's known at this point, was sort of fraught. He pushed against it a little bit, even though that's definitely where his interests have always been. And so he decided to use Hill as his pen name rather than King, to avoid anybody he's just able to get published in this sphere because of who his dad is, which certainly could have been the case, but there are merits to Hill's writing on its own. Anyway, so I've listened to a couple of stories. I finished the first two stories in full, both of which have truly gruesome moments. Carousel was incredibly creepy. And I guess surprisingly enjoyable. There was a deep and twisted logic to it that I appreciated. And I'm listening to the story narrated by Neil Gaiman, and I think maybe the setting is a little bit off from what I might be anticipating. I don't know that I love Gaiman's narration style, or maybe it's just this is Neil Gaiman telling me a story, but it's not a Neil Gaiman story. I can't really pinpoint, but I'm not as fully engaged in this one. Physically, I am reading The Layover by Lacey Walden. I'm really not very far into it. I've kind of only been reading it before bed. But it's going to be a tropey rom-com about a flight attendant on her last flight before she retires. So she's engaged to this other man, and she gets on the flight, and her arch nemesis is on the same flight as an attendant. So they're going to have to spend a lot of time together. There's a weekend layover in Belize. So this female flight attendant, our main character, is going to be, stuck in this small enclosed space with this male attendant that she doesn't like. but based on the setup, I guess sparks will fly. I'm gonna refresh that coffee. I'm gonna get some reading in because I don't have to be at work until a little bit later today, so I will let you know how it goes. All right, so it's Friday evening. This vlog has had probably fewer clips than it should, but wanted to touch base. I listened to quite a bit of Full Throttle yesterday, made it through a couple more stories, and today at work, I got to the point where I have about a half hour of listening for The Layover by Lacey Walden left. I was worried at the beginning about the whole fiance situation and the fact that she's engaged when she goes on this last flight. Not too much of a spoiler because we sort of know who the true pairing is for this story, but fiance winds up being not such a nice guy, so they break up before anything happens, so there's really no cheating involved in this particular story, which I appreciated. For now, I did have to stay late at work today. We had a staff meeting followed by, like, we call it sunshine, so there's a couple of people on staff. This year it's me and one other person who are the Sunshine Committee, and we plan, nice things or more social things to bring sunshine to the rest of the staff. So we had a little party after the staff meeting. The organization that I work for provided pizza, and I had everybody, bring a dessert to share or bring a bottle of wine. So there were beverages, there were desserts. I brought my Switch and we played a couple of games. So it was a good time. Now I have a late start to my laundry and I have to work tomorrow. So right back at it. I will probably continue listening and finishing The Layover. So I'll get a chance at some point to let you know how I feel about that. And we'll check back in when I have something else to report. Have a nice weekend. Hey, updates for this vlog have been few and far between. I had to work yesterday on Saturday, which means today is Sunday, and it is actually already 5 o'clock. You are as shocked as I am for that realization. I've only had one cup of coffee, so maybe that's the issue. I just wanted to come in and sort of update you on the week's progress. I feel pretty good about my 5-book plans for the 2 weeks I had off. I finished 2.5 books, actually a little bit more than. I finished 2 books in about 2/3 in this first week of my, semester vacation before the summer term starts. I finished Nowhere Girl, a memoir of a fugitive childhood by Cheryl Diamond, which if I had to give a star rating is probably going to get like a 4. It was a really enjoyable story. It sort of kept the action moving, though I found it a little bit choppy in parts. I finished The Layover by Lacey Walden, and that would probably get like a lower 3.5. I'll probably rate it a 3 on Goodreads, which is always linked below if you want to see any detailed thoughts on what I have read outside of these vlogs. And then I've read about 2/3 of the stories in Full Throttle by Joe Hill. I listened to all of these on audiobook through work and some of the other things that I've been doing in my life. And Full Throttle is interesting. Short stories are always sort of a mixed bag of what may draw you into a story. Overall, I've enjoyed the majority of the stories. The biggest issue I had was the short story narrated by Neil Gaiman, because I found that the Neil Gaiman-ness of his portrayal within the audiobook sort of took me out of the story. And I'm not sure precisely why that is, because I've listened to him narrate his writing before, and maybe that's the difference, that it's not his writing, and yet I'm hearing his voice. I can't really pinpoint. But the 2 short stories that I've been drawn to the most so far have been The Lost Carousel, I think is the name, and Late Returns, which has to do with libraries. So that was sort of an obvious pick for a future librarian. For now, I have some housework to do. I have laundry to fold, laundry to move, and maybe vacuuming. But first, another cup of coffee. Welcome back to Tuesday night. I have been horrible at updating my vlog. I've also been pretty horrible at reading, but I did get to about here in Hill House by Richard Matheson. You may recognize the author's name because he's better known for I Am Legend, but this was published in 1971. It's about a haunted house, as you might imagine. And it's interesting because it's sort of, Haunting at Hill House, which was published, 10 years prior to this novel, in that, it's these people that are going to this haunted house. One person has been there before. No one has entered this house in about 30 years. And we know from the start that they don't make it a full week in the house. So we start on like December 18th. And this last bit that I still have left is December 24th of the same year. So we're going to see things have obviously escalated. The events have increased the paranormal events have increased in frequency and violence. The end of day 2, I think we get a nice bit of background of what happened in this house. It was sort of a house of ill repute, of excess, of sodomy and orgies and, sexual violence perpetrated from everybody. And there was a time where the owner of the house just locked the doors, locked everyone in, and didn't let anyone in, and people re-entered the house weeks later and found a number of no longer alive people. So, very dark, very disturbing events happened in the house with live people, and now they were trying to get rid of the haunting, figure out what happened and how to resolve the house to allow people to live in it. And it's really dark. It's really dark. It's very uncomfortable in certain portions. I had never heard of this book before, but you see the hooded skeleton reaper figure on the cover, and this is what you're getting into. I can understand, based on the graphic nature, why this was recommended alongside The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And it's well written. Obviously, it's well written. We know Richard Matheson is a master of his craft. I just wasn't used to him doing, true horror rather than a sci-fi type of story with I Am Legend. Not that I've read that, but maybe I might based on this. And after that, I still have On Turpentine Lane by Eleanor Lipman, I'm guessing, which I'm hoping to finish up Hell House this evening, maybe tomorrow morning if I get myself too creeped out, and then dive right into On Turpentine Lane and see where we go. But making progress, and I'll let you know when I have some more.
So I feel like I almost followed through on what I said I was going to. I finished Hell House today while I was at work. As a reminder, this is by Richard Matheson, who you probably know is the author of I Am Legend. I had been up to the last section or the last day of the week that they spent at Hell House. And yeah, it really hit the fan there at the end. There was some really grotesque and graphic imagery that was described, and the mystery was solved of where the haunting came from and what may be happening moving forward. So I don't want to totally spoil and give away the ending. But I was able to finish the book. So that is 4 out of 5 done for this particular reading vlog. So far, I'm really enjoying the selections that have been provided by the Denver Public Library and Dodie, I think their name was, the librarian that provided these selections. It's funny, as soon as I started this vlog, I also started noticing people with their sponsored videos from TBR by Book Riot, and I'm sure it's a really great service, and obviously these people that they're hiring to offer the recommendations are trained to do so. A lot of people don't know that public libraries offer the same type of service. We call it Reader's Advisory. So you're really giving the same type of information. What have you read? What do you like? What do you not like? And what are you looking for in your next book? And we as librarians have resources at our disposal to, even if you're looking for, World War II nonfiction stories that I don't know very much about, I still have resources to find you books that are interesting on a specific topic within World War II history, nonfiction, that you may enjoy reading, even if I may not enjoy reading them. So reach out to your public librarians and see if they can find you your next favorite book. I'm sure they can get you something that you'll really enjoy. In the meantime, I will continue reading On Turpentine Lane, and I started it. I've listened to about an hour of the audiobook, and it's quirky. The voice is really fun. The characters are a little ridiculous in some of the choices and situations. Our main character is Faith, and she has a fiance who is sort of out of the picture and on some self-discovery journey. So he's trying to walk from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States, which would take a very long time. So it's a trying journey, and they're not totally officially engaged. So she bought this cute little cottage on Turpentine Lane that's like a total fixer-upper, and it's probably going to wind up falling down as soon as she gets into the place. But I'm really enjoying the voice and the quirkiness of it, and I think this is going to be a really nice way to round out the selections that Dodie at Denver Public Library selected for me. So I'll let you know as I move further along. So, first time with the action vlogging. I apologize for the framing of this particular update. I'm waiting in line to get gas, which is taking forever, as you can probably imagine. But I got my nails done, and they're very pretty and out of focus. I went with a neutral but still glitter, because these are going to be for a dinner that we're going to this weekend, as well as my concert that's occurring next weekend. So I didn't want something that was really loud like the pink I just had, but again, still glitter and glamour. You're here for the reading updates. So I'm about halfway through On Turpentine Lane by Eleanor Lipman. I just realized that I used to be really good at telling you who the narrators were for these audiobooks, and I have been absolutely failing at that this particular vlog. And I don't even know who did the audio for On Turpentine Lane. So yeah, the characters are really quirky. They're very funny. And the action is not a whole lot, to be honest. So our main character broke up with her, deadbeat fiance who was on this cross-country road trip. And, he had gone maybe 2/5 of the way across his journey and decided to come home and attempt to grovel, but not actually grovel. It was really pretty pathetic. So she said no. Good for you. And in her beautiful little 2-bedroom cottage that she purchased, the fixer-upper, one did find some pretty disturbing things in the attic, and got, I guess, freaked out enough that she has her coworker who stood up for her and was very nice and, believed her when she told her story, her side of the story. She now has this man living with her in the house after he was broken up with. So, we know where things are going. The characters are funny. The main character's family members are absolutely ridiculous. We have a brother and the parents. The parents have an interesting relationship going on, and now apparently there's some extramarital things happening. So, all these things are happening. It's a good time. I'm enjoying it, and I'll let you know when I'm a little bit further in. So I'll catch you later.
And here I am to close out the vlog on this very rainy holiday weekend. It's Saturday morning. I'm here with my second cup of coffee, and I have finished the 5 books that I set out to read at the beginning of this project. So I also wanted to review, I wound up listening to all of these books via audiobook. And as I mentioned, I used to be really good at telling you who the narrators were of the audiobooks I was listening to and didn't tell you any of them for this particular project. So let me run through those very quickly. First book I finished was Nowhere Girl, a memoir of a fugitive childhood by Cheryl Diamond and narrated by Eileen Stevens. Next was The Layover by Lacey Walden. I wound up listening to the majority of this book on audio after starting it with my eyeballs, and the audiobook is narrated by Georgiana Marie. Now, Full Throttle by Joe Hill. I'm going to read off the collection of narrators because there are many of them. We have Zachary Quinto, Will Wheaton, Kate Mulgrew, Neil Gaiman, Ashley Cummings, Joe Hill himself, Laisla de Oliveira, Nate Cordry, Connor Jessup, Stephen Lang, and George Goodall. So every one of the stories was narrated by a different narrator. There they all are. This was, again, a collection of short stories, and there were a couple that were, previously published in something else that were written for a particular project and that were collaborations with his dad, Stephen King. So this collection also included In the Tall Grass, which is now a Netflix movie, which I've not seen, but I have seen the separately published version of In the Tall Grass. It was a really interesting and disturbing story that I was surprised to see in this collection. I didn't know that it was in there. I thought it was only as that standalone volume. So moving on, I've read Hell House by Richard Matheson. The audiobook was narrated by Ray Porter. I don't know if I gave you a star rating for that. I am gonna rate it as a 4-star on Goodreads because I think it's well crafted and well written, even if it's certainly not for everyone. Anyone with any sort of concerns regarding sexual violence, steer well clear of this book. It is explicit, it is violent, it is graphic, and it's not, not for every reader, for sure. So then I rounded out my listening experience this week or so with On Turpentine Lane by Eleanor Lipman, and the audiobook was narrated by Mia Barron. We met a nonagenarian, someone in her 90s, later on in the book. It was the previous owner of the house on Turpentine Lane, and I really disliked the characterization, especially of the voice. Now, the character herself is really an awful person and incredibly anti-Semitic. So if you're sensitive to that, stay away from this book. I was surprised to see something so overt, but I think it was coming from, this character is of a certain time, but I'm like, we don't need this. Not necessary. I think it's probably a 3.5 star, and I'll probably round up to 4 stars on Goodreads because I had a good time while I was listening to it. If you have read any of these, please let me know your thoughts in the comments, or if any of these books have intrigued you enough that you might pick them up. Let me know. Otherwise, any sort of emoji or interaction, I'd love to interact with you in the comments. Like this video and subscribe if you haven't and you like what you see, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.